So I guess this is our Friday morning coffee chat. I think I'm going to talk about tariffs. Specifically, I want to talk about Trump's economic concept. I guess I don't know. I watched the debate this week, and there's a lot to say on that. But at the moment, I specifically want to talk about tariffs and why tariffs are not a replacement for having an economic plan. And they're not a fix all at all. I do still want to do a shout out though to like Hotel Chocolate, and this is not sponsored. I just really like their coffees. They do a velvetizer and they do like these chocolate coffee ranges that are absolutely amazing. And they've kept me going through the week and they kept me going through the debate. So shout out to them. Anyway, tariffs. The tariffs are like they're a concept from a bygone age. They're a concept from an economic age where countries were heavily into the idea of protectionism and self-sufficiency. It was pre the sort of globalization of the economy under Thatcher and Reagan. And for the time, like they kind of worked. The British Empire used tariffs to essentially maintain control of a monopoly, and that did support British industry for a long time. The problem is that it doesn't work very well in a world where there is a lot more global trade and a lot more equality between economies. Certainly a lot more than there was back in the days of the empires. And it tends not to have the implication that people originally think that tariffs should, or that they originally did way back then in a globally connected economy. So, on face value, the idea that you can impose taxes on imported goods from another country, like it sounds at face value like, oh, it'll just increase the cost of importing those goods, so the companies will start manufacturing those goods inside your country and therefore generate jobs or protect jobs, or it'll protect local businesses and mean that they can sell at better prices than big market chains that import their goods. The problem is that isn't what actually happens nowadays. So companies don't bring their work back because the reason they started exporting their work isn't just like the costs are so much less to produce things in China that even if you stuck a 50% tariff, it would still be cheaper to produce those things in China. Especially when you consider the fact that if you're the only country doing that, that company is still making more money producing in China and selling to Europe and selling to the UK and selling to the rest of the world. Even with those tariffs, if it wants to sell into the Americas, rather than producing that things in America and selling from America. And on top of that, at the end of the day, none of them are actually paying that cost. Because if I'm making something in China and I'm selling into Europe and I'm selling into America, I'll still be selling it at the same price into the Europe. But into America, I'll just add extra cost onto America. I'll just make it cost more for Americans. So then you have Americans paying more for items that are cheaper in Europe. And you get into all sorts of problems with that. You get into weird situations which used to happen, for example, back in like the 80s and 70s, where you were buying goods from Europe or from America to avoid paying tariffs when they were produced in certain countries. And then that ends up creating complexities, logistical costs. It just ends up being a complete mess when you start introducing tariffs. And it ends up putting the price up on everything because, especially when you start using blanket tariffs rather than like targeted tariffs on specific goods. Because if you start inputting blanket tariffs on things and suddenly it's costing more for something like raw materials that might literally only be produced in any significant quantities in certain countries, and you need those raw materials to manufacture certain items, like that starts putting costs up massively across the board on many things. And that isn't even the end of it. Because, like, I know, like, last time around when Trump was doing his thing, he was talking about tariffs, and people were saying, oh, that'll lead to trade wars. And it did lead to trade wars. Just like, I'm going to say trade skirmishes. It's because most people knew that, like, Trump was only going to last, like, 4 years maximum. So they weren't really that bothered. And they were willing to just take it on the chin for a bit. But I don't think they're as willing this time round to deal with his bullshit. And what tends to happen when you put tariffs on a certain country is that country turns around and puts tariffs back on you. And then all of a sudden, even like any cost reduction that you might make from manufacturing things in America disappears. Because suddenly it's going to cost that company the exact same amount if it wanted to manufacture it in China and export it to the Americas, or if it wanted to manufacture it in America and export it to China, like at a base level. Except you're asking them to dismantle all the factories in China, move all of that production over to America, and start producing things in America, which has a huge upfront cost. Why would a company pay that when they know that Trump's only going to be around for 4 years? The downside is that Trump's only going to be around for 4 years, so his tariffs are only going to be down there for 4 years. It's not really a downside, it's a high positive that at least term limits are set in America and you can get rid of him. But the backlash to Trump isn't going to just be around for 4 years. The backlash to Trump is going to be around for decades. And a new president might come in and they might remove those Trump tariffs, but there is no guarantee that the countries that feel aggrieved will see any difference between a Trump America and a non-Trump America. Like, they don't care. They just see America as America, whoever's in charge. And if they say them put tariffs, they blame America. Everyone in America. And they will continue to punish America long after Trump's gone. And that's one of the big worries, is that the damage that Trump does will not be contained to just his presidency. And that's going to have a huge impact on the cost of items in America, and it's going to have a huge impact on jobs. Because at the end of the day, when costs go up, companies leave. They don't stay. And if it becomes harder to sell into America, they just pass that cost on to Americans and deal with it. There are other markets in the world that are just as lucrative, if not more lucrative, to companies. They're not tied to America. They're not tied to selling into America, and they're certainly not tied to dealing with America's bullshit when it decides to do something crazy. And I really do hope in November that the American people don't buy into Trump's economic concept, and that a lot of them get more clued up on what tariffs actually mean nowadays in a global economy. Because in my own country, the UK, we bought into a lot of this rubbish in 2016 with Brexit, and we have economically screwed ourselves over it. So I'm hoping that America doesn't do the same thing, because it's not worth it. Populism just isn't worth it. Strong and stable might be boring, but believe me, in the long run, it's much preferable to be boring than it is to self-flagellate your own nation over some perceived grievances. Anyway, have a good Friday. I'm sorry for a bit of the depressing Friday chat. I've tried moving my mic around to make it a bit better quality, because I noticed that my quality was a bit shit. Yeah, have a good one. Catch you later.